In 1480, in Romania, Prince Vlad is happily married to Elisabeta. As a token of his love, Vlad gives her a small music box. One day, their intimate moment is interrupted by knights who take Vlad away because he is needed in battle. The country is at war, and as the enemy approaches, Vlad orders his men to take Elisabeta to another castle for safety. Before leaving, Vlad is blessed by the Pope and asks for holy protection for his wife. In the forest, Elisabeta is escorted toward the new location. Unfortunately, an enemy soldier hides in the trees and immediately takes down 2 guards with rapid arrow shots. The other guards prepare to fight and have Elisabeta ride ahead. Outside the forest, Vlad breaks several oil barrels to start a fire that acts as a line to hold back the enemy army. A fierce battle begins, and soon men from both sides are dying everywhere. But Vlad's army clearly has the advantage. With great skill and teamwork, they fight to win the battle. Moments later, Vlad and his army appear before the enemy king, with the heads of all their opponents impaled on spears. The moment is interrupted when Vlad is informed of the attack on his wife, so he leaves to find her. Meanwhile, Elisabeta rides as fast as she can, while enemy soldiers chase her. This area is known as the Forest of Wolves, and thousands of bear traps are hidden beneath the snow. 2 soldiers fall into these traps while Elisabeta manages to dodge them. Unfortunately, her horse eventually gets caught in a trap too, and she falls, allowing the enemies to surround her, as they carefully probe the ground with their swords. Elisabeta tries to move away, only to step on a trap herself. When Vlad arrives, his horse is also taken down by a bear trap. He continues on foot and is soon fighting 2 enemy soldiers, quickly defeating them. Vlad throws his sword to kill the man approaching Elisabeta, and the sword accidentally stabs her as well. Weeping, Vlad cradles Elisabeta in his arms as she dies. Sometime later, Vlad visits the Pope again and rants against God for not protecting his wife, even though Vlad has been killing many people in his name. He wants Elisabeta back and asks for a miracle that the Pope cannot grant. Furious, Vlad kills the Pope with a crucifix and declares he will no longer follow God unless Elisabeta returns. Suddenly, the wind picks up in the room and the statue of Jesus begins to cry, but Vlad looks proud. His terrified men have to drag him out of the church. 400 years later, in France, a priest visits a psychiatric clinic to speak with Dr. Dumont, who says he has a very delicate case that even concerns the Queen of England. The men walk through the clinic corridors, where dozens of madmen misbehave and doctors drag them roughly. Finally, they cross a steel door that leads them through a tunnel to a sealed room where Maria is chained. She is an Italian woman engaged to the Queen's great-nephew, and because she opposed a church, the wedding was held at the family estate. However, the groom brought a bishop to bless the union, and seeing the bishop sent Maria into hysterics. Records say she was born in 1759, which is impossible because it would mean she is 130 years old. Her age and her allergy to God make them wonder if she is a creature of the devil. As the men discuss the case, Maria wakes up and hisses at them. The priest approaches and notices her fangs, concluding that she is a vampire. He explains that she is the first to be captured alive, and that vampires can go out into the light. They just cannot stand direct rays. To prove it, he opens the window and the sun immediately burns her skin. When the priest holds a crucifix in front of her face, it catches fire. He then cuts the finger of Simon, Dumont's assistant, and lets a few drops of blood fall into Maria's mouth to make her cooperate. The priest checks her neck and finds the bite marks that transformed her. He explains that the church has been fighting vampires for centuries, but they have yet to find the one who started it all. Desperate for more blood, Maria mentions that the first vampire is her master. He is a prince who will soon come to the city to search for his princess. Meanwhile, the notary Jonathan travels through a forest at night. The driver suddenly stops the carriage and says he cannot go any further because the wolves will soon come out. So he leaves Jonathan with his luggage, a torch, and a crucifix. Jonathan finishes his journey on foot, keeping the wolves at bay with the torch. He finally reaches a large castle, and when he crosses the entrance, the door closes automatically behind him. Another door opens and closes on its own, allowing Jonathan to enter a room where a person waits on the balcony, only to disappear in a flash of lightning. Suddenly, Jonathan is startled when an old man appears behind him. The man throws away the torch and turns on the lights before introducing himself as Prince Vlad, also known as Count Dracula. The men sit at the table, and Jonathan eats the delicious food with gusto, but Dracula tastes nothing. With a wave of his hand, Dracula sends a plate toward Jonathan, who thinks it is just a trick. Then Jonathan looks for some papers in his briefcase, and while he is distracted, Dracula kills a rat with a fork. He crushes it with his bare hand to pour its blood into his cup and drink it. Jonathan explains that the county he represents is interested in buying an old abbey in Paris belonging to Dracula, hoping to transform it into a hospital. While taking out more papers, Jonathan accidentally drops the crucifix. When Dracula asks him if he is a believer, Jonathan says no and explains that the driver gave it to him. With another wave of his hand, Dracula throws the crucifix into the fire and startles Jonathan by appearing at his side, saying, "It is time to sleep." After Jonathan is taken to his quarters, Dracula asks him not to leave the room during the night. Dracula then returns to the dining room and plays some music before ordering a gargoyle to watch him. Jonathan finds a book in the room and looks at the text explaining the history of the castle. There is a drawing of young Vlad, but the prince's portrait has disappeared. Meanwhile, the priest visits Henry, Maria's fiancé, and tells him she is healthy, but they are still working to remove the evil from within her. Then the priest searches Maria's room for clues. Among her things, he finds the missing page from the book with Elisabeta's portrait. In the middle of the night, Jonathan leaves his room. He is looking around when he notices a light behind a door, so he enters and finds eerie stairs that lead him to a luxurious basement. In the middle of the room, he sees a coffin, and upon opening it, he discovers Dracula sleeping. The Count tells him he should not have left the room, and Jonathan is suddenly knocked out by a gargoyle. When he wakes up, Jonathan finds himself chained by the gargoyles. They hang him upside down, and Dracula cuts his neck so the blood drips into a bowl. When Jonathan wonders how God could create such a creature, Dracula laughs disturbingly and asks for his last wish. Jonathan wants to know Dracula's story, and the Count finds the idea so amusing that he has the gargoyles lower him. Dracula shares what happened while remembering Elisabeta's funeral. He explains that he spent all these centuries waiting for her, because he knows that pure souls can reincarnate. The search has not been easy. For example, during the Black Death, half of the female population died, and the other half gathered in holy places where he was not welcome. He felt so lonely that he began to envy humans for being able to die. One day, Dracula fell asleep on Elisabeta's grave. The next morning, he woke up with such desperation that he went to the nearest window and tried to take his own life. However, he survived the fall. Dracula kept trying over and over again, but no matter how many times he fell, he always survived. Since he could not search for Elisabeta all over the world, Dracula decided he needed a plan to draw her to him. For over a century, he developed a fragrance using the most beautiful and magical flowers from the most famous gardens. He finally tested the perfume in Italy, where women immediately began to follow him. The fragrance was so powerful that Dracula could go to parties and have everyone dance in perfect synchronization under his control. One day in Versailles, Dracula thought he had finally found Elisabeta, but the woman he approached was not his wife. The mistake made him weep and realize that he had been jumping from party to party, surrounded by alcohol and debauchery, but without real love. He decided to stop searching and have others do it for him. In the middle of the party, Dracula began biting all the women in the room to turn them into vampires, including Maria. Afterward, Dracula returned to Elisabeta's grave and opened it. He struck the coffin to break it and discovered that only her ashes remained. The sight caused him to have a nervous breakdown, and he decided never to leave the castle again. The gargoyles would bring him riches and act as his servants while his vampires would continue the search. In the present, Jonathan tells Dracula he can understand such a strong love because he is engaged. His locket has a photo of his fiancée, Mina, so Dracula takes a look and is overcome with emotion upon realizing that this woman is the reincarnation of his wife. Dracula then decides to let Jonathan live to thank him for reuniting him with his love. He calls all his gargoyles and tells them to bring him plenty of blood because he needs to be beautiful before meeting Elisabeta. In Paris, the priest shows Dumont the portrait he found, saying they need to locate a woman who looks like that to capture Dracula. The priest reads a passage from a book explaining that God may refuse to grant death in cases of blasphemy. However, God can also forgive the offender in case of true repentance, which would lift the curse. This means that if they kill Dracula, all the vampires he created will become human again. At that moment, Simon enters the office and notices the portrait, pointing out that there is a woman who looks exactly like that in the visitor area. Dumont and the priest run to the other room and meet Mina, who explains she is a close friend of Maria. They met a few days ago at a party, and since then, Maria would not leave her side. Maria was always very kind until the wedding, when she lost her mind at the sight of the bishop. Mina admits she has doubts about her own wedding, because she feels she doesn't belong to this era. In the abbey, Dracula appears disguised as a beggar, and the nuns agree to give him shelter. However, he drops his disguise as soon as he enters the chapel and sprays his perfume on a figure of Jesus, causing all the nuns in the abbey to run to the chapel. They fall to their knees overwhelmed by desire, and soon form a pile around Dracula, desperately seeking his attention. Without hesitation, Dracula begins to feed on them. In the castle, Jonathan waits until he is alone to throw a blanket towards some tools, pull them close, and break his chains. When a gargoyle enters, it finds Jonathan leaving through the window. It immediately cuts the blanket to take away his support, but Jonathan manages to hold onto the wall. The gargoyles try to reach him through some holes without success, so one of them hits him with a hook to make him fall. Jonathan rolls through the snow, and his body comes to a stop on a frozen lake. When a gargoyle tries to follow him, the ice breaks and it drowns, so the others do not know how to reach him. Noticing this, Jonathan begins to walk away without fear. Sometime later, Dracula arrives at the psychiatric clinic, looking younger and healthier. He uses his perfume to control Simon and has him lead him to Maria's room. Maria tells Dracula that she has found her, and he rewards her by letting her feed on Simon. In the morning, the priest investigates and finds a painting of Lot. Then he is called to the clinic, and Dumont tells him Maria has disappeared. Simon has become a vampire and has been tied to a bed. The priest notices Simon's fangs and a very strong perfume on his clothes. When Dumont shares the description of the intruder who took Maria, the priest realizes that Mina is in danger. In the guest house, Mina opens the door upon hearing a knock and is surprised to find a healthy-looking Maria, who tells her that Dumont discharged her. Maria explains she has a friend who is anxious to meet Mina and forces her to put on nicer clothes. The women go to a hotel where Dracula awaits them. Seeing his wife's face again makes him cry. After showering Mina with compliments, Dracula kisses her hand, causing her to have a vision of them together. Feeling somewhat uncomfortable, Mina withdraws her hand and leaves with Maria to have fun at the festival. Dracula follows them as the women enjoy food, drinks, games, a show about a fake mermaid, and cute animals. When they enter a haunted house, the women are accidentally separated and Mina gets lost. She screams when startled by a fake skeleton, and Dracula immediately appears at her side to guide her out. In the shooting gallery, Dracula teaches her to shoot, and in his embrace, Mina has another vision of the past. Afterward, Dracula invites them to rest in his hotel room while waiting for the fireworks show. Mina and Dracula chat for a while, and he shows her the small music box. When it plays the song, it sounds familiar to Mina, and she begins to have visions of being Elisabeta. She immediately backs away and accuses Dracula of having cast a spell on her. Dracula tries to tell her the story of Elisabeta and his hopes that she would reincarnate, but she insists she is only Mina. He ends the talk by gifting her the music box. Then, Maria drags Mina to see the fireworks. At the end of the night, Dracula accompanies Mina home, leaving her with a big smile, but her happiness is replaced by shock when she finds the priest and Dumont tending to a sick Jonathan in the living room. The priest tells her what happened to her fiancé, but Mina refuses to believe Dracula could be cruel, so the priest has to explain that Dracula is a vampire who feeds on human blood and uses perfume to control his victims. He checks her neck and is relieved to see there are no bite marks. Mina runs to her room to cry in private and ends up opening the music box. She continues to have visions of Elisabeta, and only snaps out of them when Dracula appears at her side. Mina asks him to leave, so Dracula tries to exit through the window. Not knowing his powers, she thinks he is going to take his own life and stops him. Then she begins to accuse him of having deceived her, so Dracula assures her he never used the perfume on her and throws the bottle into the fire. Then she mentions the blood sucking, which Dracula admits he does, but promises she will never be his victim. Mina's nose begins to bleed, so Dracula collects the blood with his fingers and licks it. Then he takes her hand and says romantic things to her as the visions return. Hearing the last words he said to Elisabeta, Mina finally accepts the memories as her own and calls Dracula her love before kissing him. They end up being intimate, and Mina also asks for immortality, so Dracula bites her to transform her. At that moment, the priest smells the same perfume he detected at the hospital and realizes Dracula is in the house. He takes a weapon and runs to Mina's bedroom, only to find it empty. The priest and Dumont think Dracula must have taken Mina back to his castle, and Jonathan agrees to take them there. Meanwhile, Maria reunites with Henry. She is very affectionate with him, as a way to keep him distracted. When she is about to bite him, the priest group interrupts her. Maria roars furiously and prepares to attack, so the priest takes her down with a shot. However, Maria quickly recovers and knocks Henry down, before capturing the priest to try to kill him. Jonathan finds a sword on the wall and immediately uses it to decapitate Maria. Her head goes flying and knocks down Dumont, while her body chokes the priest a bit more before collapsing. Since it is still twitching, the priest takes a crucifix and stabs Maria's heart to kill her for good. In Romania, a group of servants leaves a coffin inside the castle. Dracula and Mina step out of it, and he gives her a tour of the place. After meeting the gargoyles, Mina plays the music from the box and puts on Elisabeta's dress. At the castle gate, the priest team has arrived with some soldiers. They wait for the servants to leave and run in to keep the door open so they can enter. A soldier shoots at the main door, while men near the forest open fire with cannons, causing many parts of the castle to collapse. Dracula tells Mina to stay in the room while he goes out to fight, but Mina is terrified because the cannonballs are destroying the roof. The gargoyles descend to fight the soldiers, taking them down one after another. However, the army greatly outnumbers them, so it is not difficult for the humans to keep advancing and take over the castle. Jonathan guides his friends to the basement room, while the soldiers search the upper floors. Mina sees them coming and locks her door. In the basement, the soldiers open fire on the coffin. Unfortunately, Dracula appears behind Jonathan and knocks him out, calling him ungrateful. He then begins to fight the soldiers with a sword, moving quickly among them with precise strikes to take them down one by one. More soldiers soon arrive, but Dracula kills them quickly too. Henry takes advantage of this distraction to shoot Dracula with 2 pistols at the same time, but it is of no use. Dracula jumps on him and bites his neck. With a wave of his hand, Dracula closes the door to prevent more soldiers from entering and holds the priest at sword point. The priest tells Dracula that God never wanted him to kill for him because God does not want his creation to be destroyed. When people kill, they do it for themselves. When the priest says he was sent by God to save Dracula, the Count points out that his only salvation is Mina. However, the priest says Dracula will be her damnation. Hearing Mina scream in her room, Dracula runs to help her and asks his gargoyles to buy him time. While the gargoyles fight the men in the hallway, Dracula kills all the soldiers in the room. Once everyone has fallen, he bursts into the room to reunite with Mina in an embrace. The priest tries to follow him, so Dracula closes the door. However, the priest reminds him that if he truly loves his wife, he must do the right thing. Ignoring Mina's pleas, Dracula leaves the room and locks her in. He leans against the door, and the priest prays to his god while driving a stake through Dracula's heart to kill him. Afterward, Mina drags him inside the room so they can share their last words of love before Dracula turns to ashes. All the lights in the castle go out, and the gargoyles transform into human children. Jonathan arrives looking for Mina and finds her crying over the ashes, which are now blowing away. Realizing he has lost his love, Jonathan leaves. Outside the castle, Dracula's ashes scatter in the wind. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can see more videos like this. Thanks for watching.